What's up guys, Grandmaster Garrett here. Today we are going to explore the King's Gambit accepted, but instead of being boring and predictable with knight f3,
know your fucking place, trash.
We are going to spice it up and go with bishop c4. Oh, what's that? You don't like that move because of queen h4 check?
Ow!
Scared of a little check right here? Unless your IQ is in the single digits, don't worry, you're gonna survive. So obviously there are three moves here. Pawn g3 loses immediately, so don't do that. Instead, we are going to go king f1. In this position, we will cover a few different variations, the first of which is the move bishop c5. This is actually the most played move in the Lichess database, which is funny because it exposes how god-awful the average chess player is. Anyways, this move threatens checkmate, so if you play knight f3 in this position, like nearly 8,000 geniuses have done in the past, I want you to rethink your life choices. Obviously, this bishop move doesn't work because you have d4, and from here, you win tempo on the bishop and you are going to have a great game. A better move for black is knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4. Ignore the threat for now and play knight f3, forcing your opponent to retreat. Just a reminder, if they put their queen on g4 for whatever dumbass reason, you have a common tactic in the King's Gambit, with bishop f7 check, and if they take, you can fork the king and the queen. In this variation, the pawn is still undefended, and while queen e1, queen e2, and knight c3 are all playable, I think d4 is the trickiest move here. It looks like your pawn is about to see God pretty soon. However, black is not going to have a good time if he takes the pawn. Now we go queen e2 and pin the knight. The knight is surprisingly hard to defend here, and there are three ways black loses immediately. Queen g6 loses to knight c3. The idea is simple, attack the pinned piece. After f5, a sad attempt to hang on, it is time to absolutely obliterate your opponent with knight e5, forcing the queen to move and developing your knight to a more active square. From here, basically everything loses. The computer says queen f6 is the most resilient move, but this allows you to develop a massive central position, and I can't imagine a world where black doesn't resign here. You threaten everything, especially knight f7 attacking the queen twice as well as the rook, and if the queen moves, you can start causing devastation with knight c7 check. After this, your opponent can decide whether he wants to sack his queen for the knight, or go king e7 and sack his queen anyways. And that's because it's the only legal move. So what are the other two moves that lose? Well, queen c6 is nearly identical to queen g6. Most of the ideas previously mentioned still apply. The other move to defend the knight is d5, which is pretty bad. Bishop takes, and now you have another attacker on the knight. They can't even develop their bishop because we are eyeing the b7 square, and they're gonna lose their rook. By now you're probably thinking, what if my opponent isn't a moron? Well, then they're going to go pawn f5 right away. Here you still go knight c3, the majority of players will play bishop e7, and we are going to end up in a position that looks like this, where white is more active and is ready to unleash the rook. One variation you might see is with the queen on h5 instead of h6. Now if we go d4 and they take the pawn, we pin the knight, now they can safely play d5. Now you're still going to play knight c3, and if they take your bishop, you get this position, which looks pretty good for white. Alright guys, enough studying. I basically already mastered the position. It's time to put my theoretical knowledge to the test.
Showtime.
This is it. Now all he has to do is play queen h4 check, and he might as well resign from here. In fact, after he plays it, I'm just gonna tell him in the chat that continuing to play from this position is a lost cause, and that I will be awaiting his resignation. You weren't supposed to do that. Already on move 4, I'm out of theory. But fear not, my friends, for this is where we learn what to do against an opponent who makes random moves. Here I went knight f3, preserving my right to castle and preparing d4. My opponent shows his hand with this move, preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop. In my opinion, this move is way too slow, especially since I'm already ahead in development. After this, I grab the pawn on f4, he goes knight f6, and I go knight c3. This is really the main idea of the King's Gambit. You develop your pieces really fast and have a massive center. He plays another slow move and I decide to pin his knight to the queen. For a little bit, I was thinking of playing the best move, e5, but I guess I didn't like knight h5, which threatens my bishop. I clearly did not calculate well because after knight h5, I have bishop g5. From here, I have a tactic with knight d5, threatening to trap the queen if they play passively. Now, they would probably see this and play the best move, d6, after which I win the rook. If they instead block with the knight in this position, I add another attacker with knight d5, and after the best move, rook e8, I have g4, which traps the knight. Now, let's see how the rest of the game panned out. By taking the knight, I've removed the defender of the bishop on g4, and I can take it for free. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed, drop me a comment or something for the algorithm, and I'll see you next time.